This vote is for Stephanie Wiedeman.
The back and forth over the third trustee seat is now over.
Yeah, a new interim trustee was elected last night.
The newly elected trustee says she is not about siding with the other two trustees or Supervisor Tiffany Henyard, but the residents of Thornton Township.
A lot of things happening, and I think it's time to get the township back, up and running and to a place where our residents are happy and comfortable with their services.
Welcome, everyone. Today we actually have a special guest here with Trustee Wiedeman, a longtime public servant with over 20 years of dedication to Thornton Township. And this is her third time on the channel, and it's great to kind of link back together. I believe the last time we talked was quite some time, but the first time we spoke, it was about 11 months ago or something crazy. And a lot has happened. So for those who are not familiar, can you briefly share your history of the township and how things have changed since Tiffany became supervisor to where we are right now?
So I started my employment with Thornton Township as a part-time employee in really 2003. I just worked my way up from there throughout several different departments, all the way from general assistance to the senior department. I assisted the assessor's office. I ended up in finance for probably about 10 years. And then, I moved to administration. So it was a lot of growth throughout that, a lot of experience in being in each department and understanding processes and rules and things along those lines. And then that continued until the previous supervisor passed away. And that was in 2022. That same year, Tiffany was appointed. It was in March, I believe. He passed away in January. She was appointed in March. March 3rd, actually. And I was fired March 22nd. So it wasn't much time. I was there with her. And then from there, just the experience and knowing how the money comes in and how the money should be spent, the things that I saw going on, obviously, just made me kind of curious as to, how these things were happening. So then you start sending FOIAs and asking questions, and then the questions are very evasive. What they send you in these FOIAs don't, look right. And then you got more questions, and then there's more lies and less transparency. And, we're human. So when we're being told no, well, now I want to know more. And it just kind of started this journey. I had a Dalton resident, actually, Sherry Britton, was one of the first people to reach out to me from Dalton and say, hey, we see what you're doing over there. We've got the same thing happening over here. It happens to be the same common denominator. We should all work together. Communities are stronger when they're together. And from there, it just kind of grew into one person paying attention and then lots of people paying attention. And we love the attention, all over. But when you specifically see our residents, people from neighboring communities, from, a community 3 cities over, and when we all come together in the same place and, there's that unity, and it's just a really nice thing to see, the community engagement that we've gotten from a process that has been, tough and exhausting. There are many plus things to this. Like, the residents are so involved, and it's invigorating. Like, I've been in politics out here for a long time, and I've never seen anything like this.
And talking about that, what motivated you to even consider the trustee position? Because you are replacing Jerry Jones, who resigned back in October, knowing how exhausting it has been and contentious, to say the least. I mean, you've been in the meetings, you've been there in person with a lot of very, let's say, emotional reactions, going back and forth between residents and maybe some of the people who are working for the township or having other political positions, the way they're going back and forth. And I would say definitely you were the first person I've seen on the local news kind of ringing the alarm about some of the discrepancies with the administration and spending. But what motivated you to even consider the trustee position? You've dealt with this administration, obviously not for a long time, but being dismissed. Why did you decide to do it?
The residents. Honestly, at first I was hesitant. You are kind of putting yourself in the line of fire, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But it was just one after another, after another, after another. And finally, I was just like, you know what? It kind of makes sense because we're talking about a very short time frame here. The person who would have filled that vacancy was only going to sit there until the new board was sworn in May.
Mhm.
So given what's been going on specifically, because there's so many decisions that need to be made and they need to be made fairly quickly, putting somebody in there who you had to catch up, somebody who, couldn't just hit the ground running. It didn't seem that it would help the situation we're in at all. So I think just merely based on experience and the short time frame, it really just made sense.
Gotcha. So what are the immediate priorities now? So like you said, you have a short time frame, the pressure is on, obviously. But like you said, you have experience, which is better than someone jumping in and trying to catch up when they only have a few months. So what are your immediate priorities in this new role?
So obviously, first and foremost, we all know insurance, just to get things back, services back running. Insurance is a priority. The budget for sure is a priority because, as you know, I'm sure you've heard in the meetings that the levy needs to be passed, and ideally it would be 100% recommended to be able to do them together, although not impossible to do them apart.
Mhm.
So the goal is to get through that, passing the levy. I also think that there are, some important things to touch on when it pertains to some of the things that she's, got on the agenda. Like, for instance, the employee bonuses, depending on what that looks like. I think that should be a fair discussion amongst the five of us because, I mean, honestly, regardless of what's going on with the media attention and maybe her core inner group of people she has with her, I mean, there's 100 employees at Thornton Township. 90% of them come to work and just do a job every day. I think it's fair to say that we should, keep separate these types of things. I think another really important thing is to make sure that the residents get answers to their questions, that they get the backup that they may want to see. So I have some ideas to help give the residents a way to get responses to what they want and to, be able to provide them what they need, because it's important that that trust gets built and, they have a involvement in the decision-making process and they're aware of why things are happening. So I have a lot to do in only 6 meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about that, do you think it's possible to be able to have some collaboration with the supervisor in the last few weeks? Also, have the supervisor contacted you yet? Because I guess I'm trying to figure out how it works normally. I know this is the abnormal situation, but I'm just wondering when there's a healthy board and the supervisor in a situation where things are not as crazy as it is now. Is it constant communication between the board and supervisor? Because I'm just trying to figure out how it's supposed to be, and I'm wondering how it is now in this situation where you're involved in as a trustee now.
Right. So I'm not sure. I think that the communication right now between Trustee Gonzalez and Trustee Carlisle might be through email. And I think the clerk may communicate a lot. I'm not sure if there's much communication between the supervisor and them. I've never really asked them.
Yeah.
But as far as me, I mean, I'm here to make sure that what the residents need to get done gets done. If you know, me and Tiffany have to communicate about that, we most certainly will, I'm sure. But we don't have to agree. We each have a vote. We can vote that appropriate way. I'm not going to go against her just because she's Tiffany. I think that, you know, there might be some things we agree on, like, well, the insurance, for instance. You know, it may not be hot topic things, but I think that to represent our communities well, there does have to be some sort of door for us to be able to, you know, get through a meeting and do it with respect.
Right. And how do you plan to ensure there's a transparency and accountability? Like, there's a lot of tension going on, and I guess what I'm asking is in terms of what is being said in these meetings, but also what's going on outside of the meetings. Is there a way to ensure that things are going well? Does the court still need to be involved? I know that Henyard, Supervisor Henyard, has been going back and forth in court proceedings. Are you prepared to kind of continue on in terms of, you know, I've seen like Trustee Gonzalez and Carlisle are being more assertive in what they're trying to do. Do you think that's going to continue?
I mean, if there's things in court already, it's not likely that those things are going to stop. They're going to have to be dealt with through the court process. So whatever that may bring to the table, we'll just have to see as it happens. But again, I don't think that if there was a situation where trust could have been built at some point, there would have been an issue with being able to, you know, communicate and maybe get things done in a different manner. But there is something to be said about it being hard to communicate with somebody who doesn't ever accept responsibility or accountability for anything. So I think that the trustees have done a great job, but they know that there's business that needs to proceed just as well. So I think that I have good communication with them. I've known Chris for a very long time. I haven't known Carmen for that long at all, but she's amazing. So I don't foresee any problems on, you know, the decision-making process and, you know, trying to get business back to, you know, what the residents deserve.
What are your, I guess, expectations for the next township meeting? What is your mindset going into it? Because it's very, you know, it's a high pressure situation. There's a lot being said. There's expectations from the residents. I know a lot of the meetings can become very, very passionate, and I'll say that to say the least. Trying to you know, deal with that chaos, that can kind of, that environment. What is your mindset? Like, are you doing like some meditation before you start, you get in the building, or, you know, some kind of like yoga? Like, what is your, because you've been in these meetings all the time anyway, so I guess you have an idea. But how are you handling it?
You know, for me, it's kind of just another day. This has been a long 3 years. There's been a lot of situations that have been uncomfortable. And I think that situations like that, specifically for somebody like me, who is very much an introvert, who is relatively, you know, worn out from a lot of people interactions, for me, it's so for me, it's just a different kind of scenario I'm putting myself in, and there's definitely been more growth than I can explain. You know, just in the way I remember when you interviewed me the first time, the conversation you and I had before we went on air. Even things like that, it's been a lot of growth, and I think that those situations, they're just not uncomfortable anymore. You know, I'm not uncomfortable around the staff, which really has never been the case, but you know, the people she keeps around her can sometimes make a room feel uncomfortable. Um, but for me, it's just kind of the norm. You know, that vibe wasn't there in that meeting on Tuesday. It was a whole different vibe. You could see it in people's faces. You could see it, you know, the clerk did an amazing job organizing and setting up in coordination with, you know, South Suburban College, their physical plant team, their police department, the Cook County sheriffs. Like it was great, and the people in there were happy, and it was an amazing night. So I think that bottling up that feeling that we had in that room that night and trying to keep that same thing pushing forward through these last couple months just makes the next phase easier.
So, in your view, do you think the situation in township with Henyard and obviously Supervisor Henyard and all the things that have been said either by Keith Price or even Michael Smith about some systemic issues, do you believe that Henyard's leadership reflects a larger systemic issue within the Thornton Township politics, or do you just think that it's her administration, how she ran it, just wasn't something that happened before, and it probably shouldn't happen again? Like, what do you think is, I guess, is there a broader problem with how politics is being handled, at least in the Thornton Township, in your opinion?
So I would say that, okay, so I disagree. I think that what we're seeing here in Thornton Township specifically is a result of Tiffany's leadership. Um, or yeah, I do believe that. I I also believe that it does point out some very alarming issues in our system. You know, the fact that the residents had to fight to stop this, the fact that, you know, that there are entities there that are supposed to help that didn't. I think it does point out some things about our system as a whole, but I don't think that that points directly to what's taken place here in Thornton Township.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering because the way you were elected to be trustee, I thought was pretty on board. You know, they had the paddles, they had the voice vote, and I know that there was other situations. I mean, with if Tiffany Henyard, for instance, to be appointed supervisor, I'm wondering, do you think, or should it always be based on the voters of the township, more of a broader thing rather than the appointment from, I guess, the board? Like if I mean, I'm just like if I'll back it up. If you were a supervisor, right, or you were newly elected supervisors came to you seeking advice on what you should prioritize, what would you tell them is the most like crucial steps to restore trust, accountability, progress? What advice would you give that supervisor?
Um, Transparency, honesty, accountability, and presence.
Mhm.
I mean, in a nutshell, that's really what it's going to take. It's going to take somebody that's willing to say, "This is what we have at hand. This is my thought on approaching it," and being able to come to an understanding of what's best for the community as a whole. Um, Being able to discuss how they got to that decision, being able to navigate if the decision needs to change based on, you know, any feedback. I think that, you know, somebody that we're talking about local government, you know, unless you live in a big city, chances are you know who your mayor is, you know what they look like. You know, we're talking about 17 communities that are suburbs. So we all know our mayor, you know. I feel like it, it should be, you know, a little more. Okay, so it's a hard question to answer because I understand why they have it set up this way.
Yeah.
The board is elected by the people. We put the trust in them to make good decisions on our behalf. However, depending on circumstances, that could be 100 different ways in one person's head.
Right.
So having seen the process go both ways, I would think that it would be fair that the residents, get to choose. In my opinion, I know that's not standard, and it's not standard anywhere. There's always a time frame for the board to appoint first.
Right.
And again, I understand why. I just think that, ultimately it's our money and we should get the say.
Yeah. I guess the idea, at least in my head, is do do you think there's major changes that need to be implemented, or maybe just some minor, maybe some procedural stuff? Obviously, I think a lot of people are learning now that you may want to make sure that you are paying attention to what's going on in your community, especially in smaller local governments, to have an idea what's happening. But do you think it's more of like tweaks or big changes that need to be done?
I think that's going to depend on what department we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
From where I've sat these last couple of years, and what I can gather, I feel like our youth department, which provided our mental health services, our after school program, our days in the park, summer enrichment, it's everything youth related and mental health related was coming from our Riverdale location. And there was a point there where Tiffany was very publicly advocating for mental health services and how important it was, and there was a referendum question to raise the taxes, which didn't pass. But it's disappointing to know that there isn't a counselor at the Riverdale building. They're not offering mental health services. Departments like that are going to take a little bit more time to rebuild. That's going to be a little bit tougher. Things like general assistance, which has for the most part continued to run smoothly, and ones like that may need less work.
Yeah. What would success look like for you in this role as trustee by the end of your term?
I think that making sure that the proper information is gathered and the proper decisions are made to not set the next administration up for failure. So I think kind of getting through what has been halted now, just kind of makes things easier for the next administration when they come in. There's not really a lot of time to change anything or stop anything, but there is time to get things in line so that the next board can pick up and take off right away.
Gotcha. And this is the last question.
Okay.
So I know, maybe 11 months ago, you were on my channel, and I've seen you on many channels, on TV. I see like little documentaries and other bigger YouTubers and stuff like that. And now you are trustee. So Trustee Wiedeman, do you have a future in politics? Because I know the term is done in May. Do you think? I guess I'll have to ask this question after you finish the term. But do you think you want to kind of continue on? Not necessarily, obviously you work for public service, but to be elected to positions. Do you think that's something you would want to do in the future?
No, only because let me explain.
Yeah.
Because of course I love the service, but I love the work. I like being a part of the process. I like being like connected with the communities, like on the grounds, and not that that's not what the politician does, but there are limits on their involvement in the day-to-day activities. There is limits on their involvement with, the employees or I just think that there are certain people that are set up to be in those seats, and I respect them, but I like to be on the other side, and it's just for me and who I am, I feel like I'm able to give more that way.
Gotcha. Hey, appreciate it. You got to know what you want to do, right? Like you kind of feel like what's your role, what you're good at, and kind of go in that direction. But the fact that you were able to jump in, and so many of the residents were, I mean, that was the happiest time I've seen of any of these meetings when they, decided to elect you, and you actually had that landslide victory. It was pretty obvious. We all saw it on the stream. So, Stephanie Trustee Wiedeman, appreciate you for hanging out with me for a few minutes. Appreciate the information, and we've all been a long way in this journey, and we are obviously us outsiders. We're still watching, and hopefully everything is going to go well for the residents and everyone out there being safe and participating in democracy, participating and electing their officials. So appreciate your time, and thank you for hanging out with me.
Thank you very much.